Welcome to Techies Reproductive Justice, the podcast, a place for technologists and community organizers to learn from each other. In this podcast, we'll explore security tips and operations security for organizers, how to help keep our movement safe online, the intersections and history of technology, reproductive justice, and other types of movement work, what organizing in the digital age looks like, and the pros and cons of technology and organizing. I'm your co-host, Azamare.
And I'm your co-host, Liz.
Before we get into our interview, it's time for T4RJ's media recommendations of the week. Your spot for all things reproductive justice, social justice, and tech media recommendations. This week we want to highlight I Saw the TV Glow. It's a coming-of-age psychological horror drama film written and directed by Jane Schoenburn. Schoenburn has frequently described the film as being about the egg crack, a term for the moment in a trans person's life when they realize their identity does not correspond to their assigned gender. Trans stories by and for trans people are more important than ever, and this film really showcases the power of marginalized voices telling their own stories. Now let's get into the episode.
Becca Nall, she, her, is the founder and designer of INeedANA.com, the most comprehensive and updated resource for people who need abortions in the U.S. As a reaction to her own frustrating experience of navigating the internet to get an abortion in Texas, Becca started building INeedANA.com as an independent passion project in 2016. It has now served more than 1.2 million unique users. On the technical side, she has more than a decade of experience designing and building digital tools at places like Khan Academy and Netflix.
So thanks, Becca, for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here. The first question is, please share your background and the work that you do.
Yeah, thank y'all both so much for having me. My name's Becca Nall. My pronouns are she, her. And for the last 15 years, I've been a professional designer and kind of part-time engineer. And so for me, what that's meant is that I've designed a lot of logos and websites, and I designed like tequila bottle packaging one time back in the day. I try to make things that are usable and beautiful and ideally evoke some kind of story. I've also done a lot of product design at places like Netflix and Khan Academy, and that's really like product design in that sense is really about building tools that people use every day in their jobs. In the case of Netflix, I was building tools for people making movies and TV shows. At Khan Academy, I was building tools for teachers. So that's a lot of my pre-abortion engineering working, or like not even pre, sometimes like at the same time abortion engineering work. Before that, I got a degree in advertising from the University of Texas at Austin. And so I think that sometimes that like salesy and like what's the return on investment businessy kind of mindset is like a big part of my background. And before that, I was really a theater kid. So I love to like, thank you, Liz, a fellow theater kid, I think. I love to make people laugh and feel, and I believe really deeply in the power of storytelling. And so I think that's a really key and helpful piece of my background too.
Yeah, also former theater kid here, but on the tech side, I was never on the stage. Yeah.
I think the tech side is so equally important. And that's like one of the magical things about the theater program that I grew up in high school, at least. Like everyone, if you were on stage, you had to do tech too. You had to do both. And I love that. And we were using like power tools and like duct taping sets we had to stand on. And like, I just think there were so many valuable lessons in all of that. So yeah, I think theater is such an incredible place to grow up.
There's so many theater people in our group because Liz, now Becca, we love a theater kid.
Thespians make the world go round.
Honestly, like hug the theater kid in your life today. Okay, so the next question we have is, how do your identities and your personal history shape the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, what are my identities beyond being a theater kid? That is such a core one. I'm glad we got that out of the way. I mean, let's see. I'm the atheist granddaughter of a Baptist preacher. I'm a born and raised Texas cis woman that moved to California 10 years ago. I'm an artist. I'm an engineer. 15 months ago, I became a mom. I mean, I'm a white woman. I think that like all those things shape the work that I do. I think though that the thing that I think about impacting the work that I do in the most meaningful way is really growing up raised very liberally in a pretty small to mid-sized central Texas town. It's like deep Bible Belt where I'm from, and so anti-abortion rhetoric was not some like ethereal like side thing. like I remember going to in public school at lunch Bible studies that were like anti-abortion seminars in like the 7th grade. It was like very much so a like omnipresent thing, and religion and football were like the things that like everyone talked about. And so I think that that paints so much of like who I am and how I interact with the world, like having grown up knowing that I'm like sitting in rooms full of people who like actively think I'm going to hell because I do not go to the church that they go to. And I also know many vehemently anti-abortion people who've had abortions and have supported them. And so I think that those experiences and those identities help me hold a lot of nuance and conflicting ideas in service of meeting people where they are, and like for the work I do, helping them get abortions no matter what. So yeah, I think it sometimes all comes back to like being a little girl in Temple, Texas and feeling a little outsidery, but still wanting to be part of that community and help folks.
I guess this is not serious at all, but the you talked about it was religion and football were like the two things that were omnipresent in Texas, and we already covered the religion part, but how about the football?
Oh, how about the football? I mean, I tell people all the time I'm such a bad Texan. I like only went to one high school football game, and like I went to the University of Texas at Austin, Hookham. I did not go to a single football game until after I had graduated. There were just always like theatery things to do on Friday nights or Saturday instead. So yeah, it was a really 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 big deal, and it was something that I kind of just opted out of. But like I mean, yeah, where I'm from, people would joke that you could see our football stadium from space. It like was massive. It was right off I-35. After I graduated, we were like the first Texas high school to get a jumbotron, and this is like not a rich town. But so many of the resources went to football, and our team was epically bad. So it, yeah, it was kind of always there, always kind of funny. The one football game I went to, I was the way that our homecoming queen nominations worked was like each like official group in the high school got to make a nomination, and so I was the theater group's nominee. And I have to say, like, I wore like a mum. This is a very very Texas football thing. I wore a mum, and I like added black ribbons to it and some like theater props and whatnot, and it was actually really fun. And I was like, maybe I should have gone to more football games. This is pretty entertaining. So
I don't know what a mom is.
oh, you gotta Google image search that
Okay.
and add it to like the show notes or whatever. It's this like, I mean, it's all like paper and ribbon now. I think maybe they were like actual mum flowers back in the day. But you can get like, it's like this big floral thing, and then ribbons and bells and stuff hang from it. And so everybody walks around with them on all day the day before the game. And so like I can still like hear homecoming day like in the halls and the way that they like swish and jangle. Yeah, I always thought it was really stupid. And then when I got one, I was like, these are awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, so I guess this is a Texas thing.
It
Texas
is,
homecoming
it is
moms.
a
Okay.
Texas thing. I don't think it exists anywhere else.
Okay.
I mean, it's most of my family before, like my parents' generations, were really from Louisiana. They don't do it in Louisiana. It's not a Louisiana thing.
Okay. Well, there we go. We learned about mums.
Mm-hmm.
I did have like a question that's not on the list, but I want to go back because you were talking about growing up around anti abortion rhetoric and how that impacted you while you were getting into, or if that impacted you at all, getting into like pro abortion work. You can
Yeah.
also say no because it's a riff, so you can also say no if you need to think about it.
No, totally. I mean, I think that my journey to where I sit today is like decades long. And I think that I always identified as like firmly pro choice. Like, I remember Googling like where my closest Planned Parenthood was in like the ninth grade so that I would know. Like, I was never like I never had an anti choice bone in my body, always very pro. But it was something that I was not always comfortable voicing because like I knew that I was in the minority, or I felt like I was in the minority of that. I don't know if that was actually true at all. Even from a very young age, it felt like something that if I expressed, it was possible that like it could be met not just with disagreement but with violence in that disagreement. And so I was typically very cautious. And like there were crisis pregnancy centers in my town and no abortion clinic. And so I knew about crisis pregnancy centers. I don't ever remember learning about them. They just were. And the imagery and all of that just was. And it was something that I know my friends and I talked about, and I know I talked about with my mom. And it just kind of was. And we knew that that was not a place to go to for medical care or actual like supportive, even like counseling. So it was just really omnipresent. And then when I got my abortion, I had to walk through anti abortion protesters to get there. I had to experience targeted regulations against abortion providers being barriers in my experience. And I think that that really did stigmatize my experience and how I felt about it. And the fact that I know so many anti abortion people, I have so many anti abortion people in my family, really delayed me talking about my abortion and made me, yeah, quieter and more fearful. And it really wasn't until I moved to California that I realized how I was just talking to someone about this the other day. Sometimes you don't realize how unsafe you feel until you feel safe. And so I didn't really realize how much internalized stigma I had until I got here and like said like, yeah, I'm pro choice. And people are like, yeah, no, duh, of course. And it's like, no, 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 you don't know. That's not a no duh, of course, like where I'm from and even here. Right. Like I think that you can't assume full like opinions just based on where you're the geography of where you're sitting or the context of where you're sitting. And I guess we haven't even really talked about I Need Nay yet, but I think I know that I Need Nay wouldn't exist in the format that it does today. And I don't know if I'd be working on it full time if I had not been able to live in a place where that is not surrounding me all the time. So, yeah, that was a little bit of a meandering answer to that. But it does it did and has impacted me, and the working through those feelings and that stigma and giving myself the time and space to grow and process those memories and those like even current conversations differently, and giving myself the grace to feel differently and grow through that stuff. It's been a process, and I think that that's one of the things that I come to this work with, is giving people the grace to have process and growth in how they relate to the topic and how they talk about it in the words. I think that like we can always help people do better. And like a lot of the times, like people are working through their own shit. Someone once told me that this work is healing work. And I think so much of healing work is about growth and giving grace for that.
Yeah, I feel this is not really a follow-up question, but more of a statement. I really like how you're bringing up, even in the previous answer that we were talking about, knowing people who were anti-abortion but still got abortions, and like wanting to create these resources to also help people in the community that you grew up in, knowing that there are people there who still need these resources, even though the rhetoric, like the general rhetoric and consensus that it feels like there is in Texas lawmakers and Texas voters might feel contrary to that. And I think it's really powerful for you to bring up these ideas, because I think sometimes it's easy to get into have a reactive response to some of these things and be like, oh, let's just forget about Texas, let Texas secede or whatever. And it's like, well, there's people who are still in Texas that didn't have the ability to move to California, right? Who didn't have the ability to go someplace else, that are there, that still need our support and our help and our grace and our resources, and to like fight for them in the healthy, productive ways that we can.
100%. And I think like, I mean, to get on a soapbox ever so briefly, California is as Democrat as Texas is Republican, and the inverse of that. Like, I can't quote the exact numbers, but it's essentially like 55% Republican in Texas, 55% Democrat in California, right? Like, they are two sides of the same coin. Both of these places are not actually monoliths whatsoever. It's just a slight scale power tipping. And Texas in particular is incredibly gerrymandered and has been for my entire life. So yeah, I mean I think the data of like these two things are actually much closer to purple than anyone likes to think about or does think about is really important to highlight. And like from a Texas perspective, and this is part of why I think Texans are some of the like best abortion advocates there are out there, like the Texas ethos at the end of the day, I feel so much of our cultural identity is don't fuck with me and I won't fuck with you, right? Like you can go to hell and I'll go to Texas, right? Like it is a place that believes in independence and autonomy, even though that has been incredibly ignored and like I want to say like perverted, which is not actually the word that I want to use, and yet it's just the one that's coming to me. Like even though that it's been twisted, I guess, by Texas Republicans, like all that's to say, yeah, don't give up on Texas. It's a very important and beautiful and complex and powerful place.
Yeah, I really love this conversation because I sometimes feel like, so what y'all were saying specifically about Texas and just states in the South, and what you were saying about how when you went to California and everyone was like, yeah, of course you have to be pro choice, like the privilege to just not have to think about your opinions or voicing them, the privilege of being able to just like openly state something like that. And people who grew up in these types of places don't have to necessarily like navigate that until like they leave maybe and go to places in the South. And also just thinking about a lot of the like radical abortion work that's coming out of the South as well. I think sometimes people, I feel like this might be a class thing as well. Just talk about how the South is like, yes, the South is racist, but the whole of the US is racist. Yes, the South has like anti-abortion legislation, but to act like other areas don't also have their own issues, I feel like that is like some classism, some racism all intertwined. So I really love this conversation. So on the topic of, we kind of touched on I Need an A little bit. So what inspired you to create I Need an A and what was your vision for it? And you've kind of already talked about that, but if you want to dive deeper.
Can you just give a primer on what I Need an A is? before we hop into what inspired you to create it?
Yeah. So I Need Nay is the most comprehensive, updated, and I think user friendly website for people who need abortions in the United States. We have the most comprehensive and updated data set on clinics and laws and pills by mail services, be those telemedicine, be those shield providers, be those community networks, the most updated data set on practical support organizations. And we aim to put it all together in a really personalized and calm user experience that also is gender inclusive and mobile first and minor aware. And we've been doing that since 2016. But yeah, really the idea for it came from my own abortion experience. I had just turned 25. It was 2012 and I got pregnant when I didn't want to be. I called my Planned Parenthood that I'd been going to for years as kind of my general practitioner after college. And they told me that they'd never done abortions at that location before, which I was like shocked by because it's Planned Parenthood and they're so synonymous with abortion for me. I now know that most abortions have happened at independent clinics for a really long time in this country.
That's not what you want to hear when you call
Yeah.
to schedule an appointment for an abortion.
Yeah. It was like, no, I guess you can go to this other clinic on the east side. And I was like, well, are there other options in town in Austin where I was at the time? And they were like, I don't know, you can Google it. So I did. And my first results were for crisis pregnancy centers, which we've already talked about. They're very good at looking like real clinics, both online and in person. And I like to say that like they're not busy actually helping people. So they have a lot of money to do like good search engine optimization and buy ads. So they were at the top of my results. I knew to be skeptical. And so I actually ended up using Yelp as like my best source of truth to understand what was a real clinic and what was a fake one, because people are like, go to Planned Parenthood, but they didn't list on Planned Parenthoods. People are like, go to the prochoice.org NAF website. They don't list all clinics. So Yelp was really the only place with everyone. And from reviews, I could tell what was fake and what wasn't. Yelp has since added like flags for crisis pregnancy centers. Those were not there at the time. So yeah, I was really lucky in that there were a few really incredible independent clinics in Austin at the time. And I was able to compare and contrast on their website. And Austin Women's Health Center, who, like, spoiler, is still open today and providing care in Austin, Texas, they listed their prices and the other independent clinic did not. And so I was like, I forget if it was like $450 or like $500 at the time, but I was like, okay, I can come up with like $450. So I called them and booked an appointment. And then I went back to Googling. I was a couple years into my career as a designer and engineer, but I like am a millennial. I'm a child of the internet, right? And so when I feel alone, like I Google, I research. So I searched for a ton of information about the differences between an in-clinic procedure, also known as surgical sometimes, and abortion pills, also known as medical. Tried to figure out which one I'd prefer. I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours on the internet, and I never found any information about abortion funds or emotional support. And I thought I understood all of the hoop laws that I was going to have to jump through in Texas. But I went to that first appointment. I was like, okay, I know I'm going to have a 24-hour waiting period. I know you're going to have to read this pamphlet of medically inaccurate information to me. Like, I'm good to go, right? Like, I'm prepped. And then it turned out that I was only 4 weeks pregnant. I realized I was pregnant really quickly. And in the state of Texas at that time, I was legally not allowed to have an abortion until 6 weeks. We had to do the ultrasound to see the cardiac activity. They were legally required to show me the cardiac activity. And so I had to wait 2 really miserable weeks for my actual abortion appointment. And that experience of like being pregnant weeks longer than you want to be is just like something I would not wish on my worst enemy. I think it's like just absolutely one of the shittiest things in the entire world. So I like go to my appointment finally. I walk through the protesters. I have like frankly the best medical experience I'd had up until that point in my life. Like, they were so kind. There was no like rushing me out the door. It was really quite empowering. And I just kind of couldn't stop thinking about how stupid it was that there was so much, like, it was such a pain in the butt to find this information, and that there wasn't one place, and that if it was hard for me to find everything, like, I couldn't imagine what it would be like for someone with less privilege and less time on their hands, or even like kids, right? Like, I can't imagine trying to Google all that information with my now 15-month-old climbing all over me, right? And we know that many people who have abortions are parents. So I was like, this sucks, and it doesn't have to be this way. And I think that there could be a way to build something better, both from a user experience perspective and from a systems perspective, something that could like stay up to date really automatically. And so that was the vision. But like, in the grand scheme of everything, after my abortion, I kind of like went back to my life. I like went back to the guy I got pregnant with. I like was falling in love with. Like, we fell in love during our abortion, and I went back to, you know, getting to know him and dating him and trying to like start this new career of mine, and kind of put that idea of like there should be a better website for people who need abortions on the back burner. About 9 months after my abortion, though, the Texas state legislature was passing through another round of trap laws. These were the laws that became what Wendy Davis filibustered. And I was really lucky at the time that I was working for a place that would let me leave work early in the afternoons. And so I spent like the 2 weeks leading up to the Wendy Davis filibuster going to the Texas state capitol and like witnessing these hearings and sitting there in the gallery with my like orange shirt on. We like wore orange to be like, we're on this side, and they wore blue to say that they were on that side. So that was like a really first infuriating experience, because to sit there and listen to these people say that the clinic that I went to was not safe enough because they didn't have two different sets of locker rooms for male and female physicians, right? Like, to say that their hallways weren't wide enough, so therefore I had an unsafe abortion, like, it was just incredibly offensive to me. And then the way that the Wendy Davis filibuster ended, to make a long story short, they basically threw a lot of BS in her filibuster, and they were supposed to have a vote before midnight. Otherwise, they were going to have to like reset and do a totally other special session. It was going to cost the government like millions of dollars. And like, we in the gallery knew that. And so the clock was like 11:59. They like called the third strike on Wendy. So they were like, you're out. We're going to call for a vote. And the gallery and the like outside rotunda of the Capitol, we erupted and just started screaming. We screamed and we screamed and we screamed so that they could not actually vote until after midnight. It was it was such an incredible experience. And then they changed the timestamp on the vote. They came back with like, they've got witnesses both here and online. Like, Obama tweeted about like that he was watching it, right? Like, it's not like they were doing this in the dark of night. They had witnesses that they did not vote until 12:02 or 12:03. They changed it to like 11:58 and then just went on about their merry business. And the ban was. And my clinic closed. They were able to reopen. They fought it, right? But it was just utter bullshit. And for me, it was radicalizing to be there. It was radicalizing to be in this community. And it was the first time in my life where I went, oh, they're not playing the same game with the same rules. Like, they don't care. They will lie. They will make stuff up. Roe v. Wade is definitely not safe. And so, I mean, like, I remember like going to get drinks with a friend afterwards and saying that, and they looked at me like I was a total nut job, like tinfoil hat, like conspiracy theorist, right?
Yeah,
And
here we are.
yeah, no, I know, right? And so that was really this incredibly powerful radicalizing event for me. as it was for many people who were there that day and those weeks. It still took me a little bit of time to get more engineering and design skills to put it together. But in 2016, I went to a hackathon and shipped the first proof of concept. And really, like, the main vision is to create a place that anyone can come and get the information about abortion that's pertinent to them, the most pertinent stuff, and filter out all the things that aren't, and like help guide them through the options to really compare and contrast their choices. That's the primary vision. But then the foundational stuff that it's built on top of, the data and the systems, really come from the experience of watching that law go into effect, seeing clinics close overnight, seeing them slowly but surely come back online. I wasn't the first person to be like, we should have a data set of all the clinics, but I was the first person to say, and it needs to be updated daily. Everyone else had been like academics doing research, gathering this data, and they'd call clinics once a year. For someone in Texas where I was, once a year is not enough to know whether or not that clinic's open. And so we built systems that use web scrapers and crowdsource information from grassroots organizers on the ground to really get an accurate picture every single day of where are the best places to call, where are the best places to go. And so we, to this day, right, like we're sitting here 48 hours after Georgia's 6-week ban was overturned, probably temporarily, but we saw that. We got our alerts came up. We reviewed it really quickly, and we were able to update, I think within 30 minutes of that ruling coming in, we were able to update the laws on I Need an A. And we got pings from clinics directly that day saying we're increasing our services, and we were able to update within minutes of getting that information. So there's a little bit of a science and urgency to the data that was a core part of the vision always, and like an art to how do you help someone really feel seen and supported without like being there and talking to them and letting them self-serve this information and guide themselves. That's the vision for I Need an A.
I have goosebumps hearing you talk about being able to do this updates based on the systems that you created. And I was wondering if you have any other, positive, neutral, or negative, like any information about impact, or like from where you started to where you are now, like how any reflection or so responses you have on this tool, or any ballpark stats or anything that you're willing to share about like how has it gone so far?
That's a big question. I mean, I think some of the things that I'm most proud of are that like in 2016, when I built this first proof of concept, like the thought of putting every clinic in one place was radical. It was like this, like, well, but how are you going to quality control, and what are you going to do with this? And is it actually safe, like, to have everyone in one place? Like, are you putting doctors at risk, right? Like, was kind of the pushback that we got. And we pushed back and said, no, we think that abortion seekers, like, should be given all the information and can make the choice for themselves. And now that's like table stakes. There are all these other tools doing that too that are like, of course we have all the clinics. That was like radical in 2016. Being gender inclusive was radical in 2016. Being mobile first was radical in 2016. I'm really proud that the tools that have come after us, being personalized and not collecting that information, that is all default. Every new tool is doing that. And I'm really proud that we innovated in that space really early. So I think that that's one like impact thing that I see at a like systems level that I think we're part of. I don't think we're the singular cause of by any means. As far as like stats go, ineedme.com itself has served more than 1.2 million unique users. Our users spend an average of around 7 minutes on search, which really gives us a lot of confidence that these are actual abortion seekers and not just, like everyone got a spike the day of the like Dobbs leak, right? Everyone got a spike or you get spikes when there's like news about you, right? Like John Oliver featured us and that was like our biggest day ever. We tend to like filter that data out because what we care about is people who need abortions first and foremost. And it's possible some of those people from John Oliver need abortions and came back, right? But we think that most people are Googling for information, and that's how we really try to meet them. And so we're really confident that we've served hundreds of thousands of people who need abortions in this country, if not more than 1 million. And that's just the people who come to the website. We know from both quantitative data and qualitative data that people at abortion funds and clinics and practical support organizations are using I Need an A every single day to help even more people that never come to our website, right? So the fact that it's been a tool that helps those grassroots direct service people be more efficient, like know information like at the touch of a couple clicks, right? I think that's those quotes that we get from people. There was someone on Twitter the other day that was like, I need nay, you mean the Bible? Like it's where I go, it's like what I trust, right? Like that to me is like, God, like what a success metric, especially for a project that like I think this is something that I don't always talk about. I always feel really complicated talking about, but it was a side project. It had no institutional funding whatsoever until 2022. And like we have been working on this since 2016, right? And even in 2022, like we still don't have any of the like big repro funders. We've done all of this at a cost of less than $2 per unique user that we know about, and we know that it scales more than the numbers that we can track. So yeah, those are the things that make me feel really good and positive about the investment in the website and the work we've done. And to just add one more thing, we've been following up more with our like recurring donors and with people who come and volunteer with us to ask them like, how did you hear about I Need an A, and like have kind of one-on-one interviews with them. And through those conversations, more and more, we're having conversations with people who say, I found you on Google when I needed an abortion. And this was the place that helped me figure it out. It made me feel less alone. And now I donate or I volunteer with you because I want to help like the next me. I want to be there to support that. I think that like I Need an A is not built to turn people into activists in their abortion experience. I think it's really important not to try to do that. And by meeting people where they are, there is this cycle of activism and destigmatization that we see happening and people tell us about more and more. And so that's been really exciting to have those kind of user research conversations more and more over the last year.
I think that's awesome that we have people who have experience like you with abortion like building these tools. I feel like that speaks to like the importance of having people who actually have firsthand experience building these tools. And also I was really excited to do this interview because I volunteer for like the miscarriage and abortion hotline, and we use I Need an A whenever people ask questions about like clinic procedures, and it's just like such a user friendly website. We're definitely going to put it in the show notes for people to like just, even if you're not looking for an abortion, you should just like check this website out. Like it's just a really good thing to like have on hand too, like bookmark it. Like it's just such a great user friendly website, and I feel like that's important when someone's like in a situation when they need to like get an abortion or trying to figure out their options.
Or to share with friends.
I did not know that you were an M&A hotline volunteer. That's awesome. We love
Yeah,
M&A.
logistics. Yeah, the
Yeah.
logistics hotline.
So you talked about some of the things you feel you were able to innovate in the space, like personalized experience without tracking any data and having a mobile user first experience and these types of things. Some of those spoke to me as being reproductive justice values that are built into the app. Is there anything else that comes to mind that would be a reproductive justice value that you feel is built into the app?
Yeah. I mean, I think And before this call, I like re-pulled up the Sister Song website to like really look at their updated tenets on RJ. And I think like some of the things that speak to me are like they say we believe that reproductive justice is about access, not choice. And I think that that's really inherent in the user experience and really inherent in how we push the boundaries. Like since SB 8 went into effect in Texas, we have listed aid access as an option to Texans. We're really the only website where people in the most restricted states can compare and contrast traveling to another state and ordering safe and effective pills online. We really aim to help people understand the differences in cost, timing, experience, and legal risk. And we really believe that like part of bodily autonomy is like being presented with all the information, having it like presented concisely and without jargon, right? Like it needs to be like accessible, and like by filtering out information, we're not giving them bodily autonomy. And so we really prioritize trusting the abortion seeker to parse the information and make the best decision for them. And we don't come to it with a perspective of we think that this is the better option, right, for you based on whatever. We really come with here are the choices. Here are the routes of access. And then if you're worried about this, if you're worried about cost, we can connect you with an abortion fund. If you're worried about legal risk, we can connect you with Repro Legal Helpline. If you're not sure how pregnant you are, we can try to connect you with a trusted non-crisis pregnancy center ultrasound provider near you, right? Like we really believe there's no one size fits all abortion. And I think that like while that's not inherently written down in the RJ tenets, to me, that's like a core part of it. And then I think we do really aim to center the most marginalized. We really design I Need an A to everything we prioritize working on is for people with the most barriers and restrictions. And that's partially because like, yes, we think it's the right thing to do. It's also from a like product design and engineering perspective. Like when you design for worst case scenario, you do a better experience for everyone. When I was like prepping for this, I remembered the late August de los Reyes, who was a design leader at Pinterest and Microsoft and in a wheelchair himself. And he talked about disability justice and disability design and always told the story. I mean, it's a like common one, right? But the remote control was invented as like an accessibility tool, and it's one we all use and benefit from, right? So that's like a big design principle ethos that we take. We also aim to acknowledge the intersectionality of our lives. And I've talked about a lot already. Like INEA prioritizes meeting the user wherever they are, and whatever geography they're coming from, whatever gender, whatever sexuality, whatever income, whatever race. Like we want to talk to you like a peer and not assume anything about you, not assume anything about your religion, not assume anything about how you feel, and have like tools for you. And so I think that that being a focus is part of the like broader RJ framework to me. I will caveat all of that by saying, and I think that this is like really important to like put out there and something we talk about as a team a lot. I Need an A is not a reproductive justice organization. We are an abortion access organization, and like we aim to live RJ values and how we design and how we work as a team, right? Like we think that our like at the end of the day, right? Like we're slowly but surely like accidentally building like an organization with HR processes and all of that. Like we want those things to be RJ lived values, and our scope of mission. Like I look at the RJ tenets and it's like, it's not just about abortion. It's about all these other things. For us, the problem of abortion right now, in particular in this moment, is so overwhelming that we are like laser vertical blinders focused on it. And that's not to say that we don't like invest our time in helping people do other things, or like we've been having more and more conversations with trans allies, because people are like, why don't we have an INA for gender affirming care? And like, we're happy to offer like the things that we've learned and the things that we've messed up to folks and like support and advise. But number one, our team does not have lived experience. And I think that that's absolutely critical for the builders of these tools to have. And number two, it's just our lane is so much of a dumpster fire right now. We're really laser focused. So I feel it's important to like call out that distinction, because it's important to us and how we prioritize work. And I think that there are a lot of organizations that call themselves RJ that like aren't. They're abortion access, and that's like okay, right? Like we cannot all do all the things all the time.
We will link the sister song statement about reproductive justice in the show notes because I think you brought it up as also a good touch point. And for anybody who doesn't know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to say this succinctly, but abortion access is one part of reproductive justice, but reproductive justice also includes being able to take care of your own reproductive health, choosing to have or not have kids, choosing to protect yourself from sexually transmitted diseases and like all these other things. It's about all of it around your reproductive system and not just choosing to not have a child.
Yeah. Climate change is a reproductive justice issue, right? Like it is all encompassing. And I think that like that is such an important framework to work on top of. And it can like get really overwhelming when you're trying to prioritize like engineering work and tools and the problems that you're going to focus on. So we like to like, yes, but it just a little bit for our own purposes.
I think you just spoke to the importance of cross movement collaboration, though. And you're saying we can't do it all, but that's why you're trying to like get people with lived experience, like specifically like trans people, and then working with climate justice activists. Like sometimes I think orgs feel like they need to have all the answers, but it's like we can't solve everything on our own. Like that's the point of like building like these movements is like to get more people
Yes.
in it.
And I think that like one of the things, because I'm always like, I'm not an organizer, y'all. Like I'm a designer and engineer, and I saw like problem can fix, right? Like I can make something better. But I think as I've gotten more and more into the organizing space and are working more cross movement, I think one of the things I keep coming back to is like we can't do it all. And so it's really important for us to know our individual and our organizational strengths and weaknesses, right? Like I think when we can show up and say, I am so good at like finding the laziest way to maintain constantly changing information. I am like, and I'm so good at like presenting it in these ways. I am not good at policy change and lobbying and even comms campaigns and all of this, right? And so like who can Aini Nay and me, Becca, like work with to help do those things? I think that that's a really important conversation that I don't see happening as much as I like want to. And so that's something that I think it's just really there's so much to be done. We're living in such a dumpster fire that like getting really honest with ourselves with what are we good at, what are we bad at, what do we want to do more of, what do we not want to, who's doing the things that it's not mission critical for us to do, and how do we like work together to uplift that stuff instead of duplicating or doing things that aren't, I mean, this is like an obnoxious tech term, but like not in our zone of genius. I know we're not going to have like a recording of this, but imagine I have like really obnoxious quote fingers with that, because I think it's such a like gross term, and there's a lot of truth in like, no, what's your strength, work to your strength and collaborate where you're weak. That's really important in this moment in time.
I wanted to jump back to something, if we feel like we have time, to something else that you said about trying to focus in your design the most marginalized. Like we were talking about the remote control So focusing on the most marginalized or the most vulnerable people in that are affected by what you're working on helps elevate everything and make everything easier for everyone. And then the flip side of that is when you target the most vulnerable and most marginalized groups, that you end up hurting everyone. So it's like if we have laws that say if the government gets to decide who has to have a child, they also can decide who doesn't get to have a child, right? These are like two sides of the same coin, and we're already seeing this play out. I just wanted what you said brought that up in me, and I wanted to shout it out.
100%. And I think that's, like back to my like childhood ever so briefly. That's like, I mean, my mom was raised by a career military Baptist preacher, and like that was her mindset. That came from his mindset of like, when you tell someone what they can't do, you can tell someone what they have to do. And that side of my family in particular is like extremely patriotic, and like I have mixed feelings about that, but like on an individual level. But like that's a like core part of their patriotism. It's a core part of like how they think as Americans and Texans. And I think that that's something that like maybe hasn't always felt like the most important thing to voice for people who fall a little bit more on the moderate spectrum or even like further right. But right now I it is something that I like hear those folks talking about and is resonating with people. And that's something that it is certainly imperfect. I mean, back to strengths and weaknesses, like not necessarily the kind of like messaging to push us to the like post Roe world that I want us to be in. And it's something that I just went back to my hometown for like a benefit thing. And a lot of people were talking about it, talking about bodily autonomy in a way I haven't heard them talk about before from a like independence kind of perspective. So
I kind of want to touch on you saying like you hearing people talk about bodily autonomy in ways that you've never heard them talk about before. I think in this conversation, I've heard a lot of people talking about like trans rights and trans issues in relation to bodily autonomy with like abortion, reproductive justice, and like finding the links in those. If you can speak to that a little bit more, just like expand
I
on what
mean,
you've
to
been
be really
hearing.
transparent, like the trans conversation was not coming up in the like small town Texas gala of like medical professionals that I was in. But I think it's in the movement spaces that I am is like baked into the conversation now in a way that it was really not in 2016 and in 2017 when, you know, when I was pitching this, like, what if we had a gender inclusive abortion resource? People are like, right? Like, I do think that the intersectionality of those issues, the intersectionality of the uh, antagonists of these movements, right? Like, it's a circle, not a Venn diagram, right? I think is really apparent to most people.
When you were saying it's a Venn diagram, it's like, yeah, it's the same people attacking both issues, trans rights, abortion. It's just wild that I don't know, sometimes it would be great if there was I know more people are trying to do more cross movement collaboration, but like yeah, these are all we're fighting
And
all the same people.
it's all gender-based violence. This is something that me and Amy Merrill from Plan C were talking about the other day. Attacks on trans bodily autonomy, attacks on gender affirming care, attacks on marital rights, attacks on abortion, attacks on IVF, all of this stuff really is gender-based violence. And I think that when we put it in that lens, it's like, yeah, of course, we need to work together on this. Of course, this all matters. And then when we put it in the lens of gender-based violence too, the ties to domestic violence are even more clear. And then the ties to gun violence and this problem in this country of mass shootings every freaking day, right? And the percentage of people who have an actual record of gender-based violence, right, that commit mass shootings, right? Like it's all so tied together. And so it's one of those things where like I recognize that I like talk out of both sides of my mouth. I'm like, we have to prioritize only abortion because there's just too much. And these things are so intrinsic, like unlinkable. Like they are completely related to each other. And so I think that's where, like, when I think about our mission and our ruthless prioritization, like I actually can take a lot of comfort in, like, while we're not literally building tools to speed up gun reform and all of that kind of stuff, like these things are so linked that I believe that by destigmatizing abortion and helping people get health care, like there are ways that we're working on that issue that we'll never really see and we'll never really know about, but we are making collective progress together by focusing on this area. There's like a butterfly effect. Maybe that's like really naive and really hopeful, but it's the lens I like to take.
I mean, you can even tell from like the different types of people that are in the Techies for Reproductive Justice movement. Like, there's people from all types of work. Just like when you were talking about gender-based violence and domestic violence, there's like people from like that type of work that are in the chat. Just like all types of people from all walks of life. Like, this is the thing that's uniting them, like abortion access, reproductive justice. So that's pretty cool to see. And then just ending on like a positive note, like a fun question: what music are you listening to right now?
I have the like lamest answer. I'm so not fun. I have a 15-month-old, and like without fail, like both me and my spouse's Spotify like Discover Weekly and like Roundup is like Rockabye Baby, like lullabies. So it's really quite depressing. Though if you have not listened to Rockabye Baby, like it kind of slaps. I highly recommend starting with like The Weekend Rockabye Baby. I was listening to it last night. It was great. But so legitimately, like lots of lullabies. And then what's been really fun actually is like re-pulling up like full albums that meant a lot to me. So like Carole King's Tapestry is something that like me and my mom listened to, and now like Call on Me, You Just Call on Me is like the song that no matter how bad my baby is melting down, like if I start singing it to her, she like settles. So yeah, so it's been fun like playing albums like Tapestry for her and like reappreciating them in a way that I think I'd been listening to like only pop music, and I'm just kind of like digging back into the oldies right now.
I just love hearing people's music choices. So that's where that question came from. I don't know if you want to share too, Liz, what you've been listening to. I just love hearing what people listen to.
I wasn't prepared for this. I think today no, it's fine.
Sorry.
Today, I know when I was in the car, I listened to, Billie Eilish's most recent album, Hit Me Hard and Soft. It's on repeat. Can't stop, won't stop.
Love that. Thanks for sharing, y'all.
What about
Um,
you? Okay.
I actually haven't been listening to music recently. I haven't been listening recently. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks, but the last album I listened to fully, sometimes I don't like sharing my music because it's like I feel like people are like, "Who the fuck is that?" Um,
You have to hit him with it, though. How are they gonna find out if you don't tell them?
yeah. So the last musician or band I listened to, it's this black metal band called Regana, and they're like very like leftist, radical. So yeah, if you want to
I
check
will
them out.
definitely check them out. But go figure. That's one of those things, icebreaker questions. Like they always come back to me and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like I don't actually do that thing. That's why I'm asking you
Yeah.
about it
No,
for
literally.
ideas.
Well, thank
I
you
love
so much, Becca, for your time and sharing the history of I Need an A with us. It was really great to hear that and
Thank you all
inspiring.
so much for having me.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the Techies for RJ space generally, and I'm so grateful that y'all have been digging into this project because I think there's so much good work in that group and so many like awesome stories and perspectives. So I'm so grateful for y'all to take the time to put this together.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. I'm so glad that Techies for Reproductive Justice was able to connect all of us, so we were able to do this. Before we close out, we'd love to urge you to donate to ineedana.com. To donate, go to ineedana.com.
This episode was brought to you by Techies for Reproductive Justice, a project of the Digital Defense Fund. If you liked what you heard today, stay in touch with us by subscribing. Want to become a member of T4RJ or have ideas for future episodes? Check out our website, techiesforrj.org, to learn more and send us a message. Again, that's techies4rj.org. Our theme music is Beauty Flow by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. The song is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. And thank you to all our listeners. We are grateful to be in this movement together.